Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. New York, with its frenetic pace and almost electric energy, always seemed to accelerate around the students of Columbia University. In the wide, columned hallways, one could hear the click of heels, the rustle of pages, and the murmur of intellectual discussion. Each student was driven by an ambition, a desire to succeed that burned like an invisible flame. Among them walked Amara Johnson, a 19-year-old black student. Her curly hair framed a calm, focused face. She always carried a notebook under her arm, filled with formulas and theorems scribbled with almost artistic precision. Amara wasn't someone who sought attention. She advanced in the academic world with discretion, letting her talents speak for herself rather than boasting about her abilities. However, Amara had a rare gift, a genius for mathematics. Complex equations, abstract theorems, and intricate models seemed to align naturally in her mind, as if she could see them dance and solve themselves before her eyes. But this gift wasn't always appreciated in an environment where arrogance could sometimes mask true intelligence. At the other end of this advanced math room was Dr. Victor Harrington, a professor famous for his brilliant publications and charismatic style, but also for his legendary arrogance. He liked to rule over his students with a mixture of severity and contempt, never hesitating to publicly humiliate those he deemed unable to keep up with him. His reputation preceded his classes. He was adored for his knowledge, but feared for his ego. Fate, however, had chosen this precise day to provoke an unexpected collision. Amara, aware of her difference and her potential, still had no idea how much this teacher would underestimate her genius. She had only one thing in mind: to learn, to understand, and to let the numbers speak for her. But Harrington, in his arrogance, saw only a quiet, seemingly shy girl whom he could ridicule in front of the entire class. That morning, the autumn wind blew against the large windows, making the fallen leaves dance across the campus. The air seemed charged with electricity, as if something was about to happen, an event that would forever change the perception of everyone in this room. The clash between arrogance and genius would soon begin, and no one would be prepared for what would unfold. The bell rang in the advanced mathematics classroom, resonating like a signal for the intellect. The students quickly sat down, opening their notebooks and adjusting their pens. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone knew that Dr. Harrington never let a mistake go unanswered. Amara Johnson walked in calmly, her notebook under her arm. She scanned the room, noting familiar faces and those that looked nervous. When her eyes met Professor Harrington's, a chill ran through her. He had that piercing gaze, capable of unsettling any student. "Good morning, class," Harrington began in a loud, almost theatrical voice. "Today we're going to be tackling a problem I doubt many of you understand." He smirked, his eyes settling on Amara. "Miss Johnson, why don't you come to the board and try to solve this?" Amara felt all eyes turned toward her. Her heart was beating faster, but her mind remained clear. She stood, her gait calm, and walked toward the painting. Murmurs ran through the room. Some doubted she would succeed, others were simply curious to see the confrontation. "All right," Harrington said, tossing him the chalk. "Let's see if you're really up to it." Amara picked up the chalk and wrote the first steps with quiet precision. Every movement of her hands seemed calculated, elegant, as if she were dancing with the numbers. But Harrington frowned and took a step forward. "No, no, no," he exclaimed abruptly. "This is completely false. You should review your basics before attempting something so ambitious." A stifled laugh rippled through the classroom. Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she remained calm. She knew he was trying to humiliate her in front of everyone. She tried not to respond, not to lose her composure. After a moment of awkward silence, Harrington turned away, satisfied with his own superiority. The students murmured among themselves, some sympathetic to Amara, others amused by the scene. Amara, for her part, sat back down, a small inward smile on her lips. She knew this humiliation was only a temporary obstacle, and that she would soon show Harrington that he had made a grave mistake. At that moment, a burning determination ignited within her. She was going to prove, not with words, but with her genius, that no one, not even the most arrogant professor, could judge her intelligence until they understood it. The next morning, the tension in the classroom was palpable. Students whispered quietly about what had happened the day before. Some tried to defend Amara, while others speculated on the teacher's reaction. Harrington, however, wore his cocky smile, ready to set the record straight. "Today we're going to review Infinite Series," he announced authoritatively. Then his eyes fell on Amara, who had calmly settled herself in the third row. "Miss Johnson, you're going to show us what you learned from last lesson." Amara stood up slowly, aware of the stares on her. She knew Harrington was trying to ridicule her once again. In front of the board, she began writing complex formulas with natural fluidity. Every step was logical, every calculation precise. The eyes of the other students followed her movements as if fascinated. Yet Harrington frowned and walked towards her, interrupting her demonstration. "No, that can't be right," he exclaimed. "You're confusing convergent and divergent series." Amara looked up at him slowly. "Dr. Harrington, if I may, I can show you that this series converges, using the comparison method you taught us." "Permit?" Harrington sneered. "You're not here to argue. Do as I say, or remain ignorant." The room held its breath. Some students leaned forward, intrigued by Amara's courage. She took a deep breath and began explaining her method, step by step, with astonishing clarity. Each calculation she wrote demonstrated not only her mastery of the concepts, but also a creativity and logic that even Harrington hadn't envisioned. The professor, red with frustration, interrupted several times, trying to unsettle her. But Amara remained calm, responding to each objection with precision and elegance. The students' murmurs turned into appreciative ones. Some whispered, "Wow, she's really amazing. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." At the end of the demonstration, Harrington stepped back slightly, stunned. The girl had not only just proven herself right, but she had done it with such elegance that no one could have taken the triumph away from her. Amara sat back calmly, a small smile on her face. She knew this moment was only the beginning. Harrington had just discovered that he had underestimated her intelligence, and the real shock would come soon. In the back of the room, some students were taking notes, others exchanging knowing glances. Dr. Harrington's reputation had just received a discreet but significant blow, and Amara, without a word, had just scored her first point in this intellectual duel. After the grueling class, Amara left the room, her heart pounding but her mind perfectly clear. The hallways were filled with students still whispering about what they had just witnessed. Some congratulated her shyly, others simply looked at her in admiration. But Amara didn't need approval. What she felt was silent anger, frustration directed at the professor who had tried to humiliate her. Sitting on a bench on campus, she breathed deeply, letting the cool autumn wind caress her face. Her thoughts swirled. She knew Harrington would never respect her until she proved her genius in a way he could neither ignore nor challenge. Anger wasn't hatred, it was energy, a strength she could transform into determination. She opened her notebook and began to write, scribbling down ideas, theorems, and new approaches to solving problems the professor had never managed to explain properly. Each formula was a step toward her intellectual revenge, each calculation a step toward the recognition she deserved. In the library that evening, Amara spent hours immersed in equations, her fingers running over the paper like a musician at a piano. The other students were long gone, but she kept going, fueled by an almost supernatural focus. Her eyes shone with a light no one outside could see, the brilliance of a genius in full bloom. She also knew it wasn't just about proving she was smart. It was about showing that no one could judge someone by their appearance or their outward calm. Harrington thought he dominated her, but he knew nothing of the quiet strength that resided within her. That night, as she walked home, Amara felt something had changed within her. The professor's humiliation had awakened a new ambition, a desire to show the world the power of her mind. She went to bed with a clear idea: she would turn this anger into strategy, this injustice into success. And in her sleep, the numbers still danced in her head, luminous equations that guided her to her next demonstration, a demonstration Harrington would never forget. In the following days, Amara immersed herself even more deeply in her studies. Each class with Harrington became a silent challenge. She listened attentively, took notes, analyzed every explanation, every detail the professor thought insignificant. But behind her apparent calm, she was building a plan. Sitting in the library, surrounded by stacks of books and notebooks, Amara began working on a complex problem that even Harrington had never been able to clearly solve in class, an advanced differential equation that baffled most of the students. For her, it wasn't just a problem to solve, but an opportunity to demonstrate her intellectual superiority. Every night, she drew diagrams, tested different methods, and wrote pages of calculations. Her room was covered with sheets of paper, some coffee-stained, others carefully annotated with corrections and new ideas. The numbers and theorems seemed to speak to her mind, gradually revealing themselves in a light no one else could perceive. But Amara knew her plan had to remain secret. She didn't want Harrington to suspect anything until the perfect moment. Every demonstration, every calculation she performed was prepared for a specific day, a presentation that would leave him speechless in front of the entire class. Her close friends were beginning to notice her obsession. Some asked her if she was getting too tired. "Amara, you should rest a little," she would tell her, Leah, her roommate. Amara simply smiled. "I'm not tired, Leah. I'm just getting ready to prove something." This something was more than a personal victory. It was a silent but powerful statement. You could not judge a mind by its appearance, and you could not humiliate someone who had the strength and genius to defend himself with knowledge. As she closed her notebook late that night, Amara felt a new energy flood through her. She knew that this secret plan, this meticulous preparation, would soon transform the usual class into the scene of a memorable triumph. And Professor Harrington, still laughing at her supposed superiority, suspected nothing. A few weeks later, Harrington walked into the classroom with a satisfied smile and a folder under his arm. The students immediately sensed that something unusual was about to happen. "Today," he began theatrically, "we're going to hold a small competition. Each of you will have the opportunity to present an original solution to an advanced problem I've chosen." He paused, observing the students' faces. "Of course, I doubt many will be able to impress." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some students exchanged worried glances. To them, this competition seemed like a formality to showcase the professor's talent, and they wondered who would even dare to enter. Amara, sitting in the third row, listened attentively. Her mind was already buzzing with ideas. She knew this was the moment she'd been waiting for, a perfect opportunity to demonstrate her genius in an undeniable way. Unnoticed, she raised her hand to sign up. Harrington blinked in surprise but noted her name on the list with a sneer. "Very well, Miss Johnson," he said with a hint of sarcasm, "we shall see if you are really up to it." Over the next few days, Amara prepared in secret. Every calculation, every diagram, every approach to the problem was carefully refined. She knew it wasn't just a matter of skill, it was a matter of presenting her solution with clarity and elegance, so that even Harrington, with all his arrogance, could not challenge the superiority of her logic. On the day of the presentation, the room was filled with students and professors. Harrington observed each participant with a critical eye, ready to point out the slightest mistake. When it was Amara's turn, she took the stage calmly and confidently. "Hello," she said simply, "I'm going to show you my method for solving this complex problem." She began writing her equations on the board. Each step was clear, precise, and progressed with implacable logic. The students were captivated, some whispering to each other, "How is this possible?" Harrington frowned, interrupting several times to question certain steps, hoping to throw her off balance. But Amara answered each objection calmly and with poise. Her solution was not only correct, it was elegant and innovative, revealing perspectives the professor had never considered. At the end of the presentation, the room erupted in applause. Harrington stood frozen, unable to come up with a valid criticism. For the first time, he found himself face to face with someone who surpassed him intellectually, and he felt a strange mixture of frustration and admiration. Amara, serene, stepped down from the painting. She had won her first true victory, not through confrontation, but through the undeniable power of her intelligence. And in this silent victory, a message was already being heard: never underestimate a genius, even if he or she hid behind calm and modesty. The day after the competition, the classroom was electrified by the murmurs of the students. Everyone was talking about Amara's performance. Some whispered her name in admiration, others quietly discussed how she had embarrassed Harrington. But Amara, true to form, remained calm, focused on her work. Harrington entered the room with his usual confidence, but something had changed. His arrogance seemed slightly cracked, replaced by a subtle concern. He knew Amara's talent was no ordinary one, and he could no longer afford to underestimate her. Today, he began, a little less confidently, we're going to examine a series of advanced problems. I assume you're ready. Amara raised her hand discreetly. Dr. Harrington, if I may, I would like to demonstrate an alternative approach to the problem you presented yesterday. A silence fell over the room. The students held their breath. Harrington smiled weakly, trying to mask his apprehension. All right, he said, show us what you've got. Amara stepped up to the board. Her voice was clear and calm, and every movement seemed carefully calculated. She explained her method step by step, illustrating concepts that even Harrington had never been able to make so understandable. Her calculations were precise, her logic impeccable, and her reasoning captivated the attention of every student present. Every time Harrington interrupted, she responded elegantly, justifying her choices with rigorous theorems and solid proofs. The murmurs of admiration turned into exclamations, unbelievable. She simplified everything. When she finished her demonstration, she solved an additional problem, one that Harrington himself had called insoluble. The room erupted into spontaneous applause. Even some of the assistants and visiting professors nodded, impressed by Amara's mastery and ingenuity. Harrington took a step back, his eyes wide, unable to hide his surprise and frustration. For the first time, someone had not only matched him, but surpassed him in front of his peers. The self-assured professor had to silently admit that he had been blinded by his arrogance. Amara stepped down from the blackboard with her characteristic serenity. She hadn't meant to humiliate Harrington, only to demonstrate the truth: genius isn't measured by appearance or attitude. And that day, every student in the room had learned a valuable lesson. In the halls of the university, Amara's name began to circulate with respect and admiration. She had just transformed a humiliation into a resounding triumph, leaving behind a professor who, for the first time, had to rethink everything he thought he knew about talent and intelligence. The next morning, the university buzzed with discussions about what had happened in class. The hallways echoed with excited voices. Some students repeated Amara's calculations, others debated the logic she had used. Her name circulated everywhere, like a breath of respect mixed with admiration. In the classroom, the looks were different. Where Harrington once saw intimidated students, he now saw bright eyes, fascinated by the genius Amara had revealed. Even those who weren't her friends recognized that she had accomplished something extraordinary. The professor, meanwhile, sat at his desk, silent and thoughtful. His ego had taken a hit, but more than frustration, he felt a strange mixture of respect and disbelief. He had never witnessed such an elegant, comprehensive, and logical demonstration. For the first time, he realized he had catastrophically underestimated Amara. After a few minutes, Harrington stood up and, in a slightly less arrogant voice than usual, addressed the class. I think it's only fair to acknowledge Miss Johnson's outstanding work. A murmur of approval went through the room, and Amara, her eyes lowered humbly, responded only with a slight nod. The students, fascinated by the demonstration, began asking questions, eager to understand every detail of Amara's methods. She explained patiently, taking the time to clarify even the most complex points. Some of the visiting professors, who were watching the scene, took notes and exchanged astonished glances. What Amara had just accomplished far exceeded the level expected for her academic year. For Harrington, the lesson was painful but necessary. Arrogance cannot mask true talent, and underestimating someone can have embarrassing consequences. He understood that he had to reassess his attitude, not only toward Amara, but toward all his students. In the back of the room, some students whispered among themselves. She's going to change the way teachers look at us. He's a real genius. And Amara, discreet as ever, smiled inwardly. Recognition wasn't what she was looking for. What she wanted was to show that talent and hard work could overcome arrogance and contempt. That day, she had not only impressed her peers, but also made a renowned professor think, and this marked the beginning of a significant change in her academic life. A few days after Amara's demonstration, the tension in the classroom had completely changed. The students no longer saw Harrington as the infallible, intimidating teacher he had always been. His sarcastic comments and demeaning criticisms now seemed hollow in the face of Amara's brilliant mastery. That morning, Harrington had planned a new exercise to test the class, hoping to regain his authority. He chose a problem deemed unsolvable to see if anyone could solve it correctly. With a confident smile, he turned to Amara. "Miss Johnson, you can try, but I doubt you can solve it this time." Amara stood up calmly and walked up to the board, without a word of defiance, letting her quiet confidence speak for herself. She began writing her equations fluently, explaining each step of her method with a clarity and precision that captivated everyone. Harrington intervened several times, trying to create a mishap, but each interruption was neutralized by Amara's perfect control. The students, captivated, murmured, "He can't do anything against her." She literally turned the tables. Then, in a masterful moment, Amara solved a sub-problem that Harrington himself had called impossible. The room erupted in applause. For the first time, the professor felt the weight of the humiliation he had previously inflicted. The students' stares, full of admiration for Amara, seemed to weigh heavily on him. Harrington, flushed with shame, realized that his reputation as an infallible teacher had been seriously damaged. He had wanted to crush Amara with his arrogance, but he had unwittingly highlighted her genius. Amara, for her part, remained humble and calm. She hadn't sought to humiliate Harrington out of revenge, she had simply demonstrated the truth. Underestimating someone based on appearance or shyness could backfire spectacularly. At the end of class, Harrington silently walked back to his desk as the students surrounded Amara to congratulate her. She had turned the initial humiliation into a resounding triumph, and now everyone knew who the real talent in the room was. The once intimidating professor had just discovered that arrogance could be a double-edged sword. And Amara, with her calm and determined demeanor, had begun to write her own chapter in the university's history. In the following weeks, Amara's reputation spread throughout the university. Students spoke of her with respect and admiration, and even some professors began to follow her work and methods with interest. She had never sought this attention, but her dazzling talent could not remain discreet. In the classroom, Harrington's attitude had changed. He was no longer the arrogant, domineering man he had been at the beginning of the semester. Whenever Amara spoke, he listened attentively, sometimes with a touch of humility, aware that he had been confronted with a genius he could no longer ignore. One day, at the end of class, Harrington addressed the class in a serious tone and without sarcasm. "I would like to publicly acknowledge Miss Johnson's outstanding work. Her grasp of mathematical concepts is remarkable, and her contributions to our discussions far exceed what I anticipated." The class erupted in applause, but Amara didn't try to boast. She bowed her head slightly, letting her calm and modesty do the talking. Some students approached to congratulate her, whispering, "It's amazing, she's really brilliant. And she remains humble. I don't understand how she does that." Harrington sat at his desk and mentally noted each step Amara's talent had taught him. Arrogance could easily mask the truth, and underestimating someone could backfire spectacularly. For the first time, he understood that a teacher is nothing without the respect and appreciation of his students, and that intelligence is not measured by authority or sarcasm. Amara silently continued to work on personal projects and advanced research, using her genius to solve complex problems and develop novel solutions. Her recognition was not only in the applause, but in the sincere respect she earned with every interaction and demonstration. The halls of the university, once filled with murmurs of concern and mockery, now echoed with admiring discussions of her talent. And Harrington, now aware of his own error, had learned a valuable lesson: intelligence and genius cannot be judged by appearances or arrogance. Amara had transformed an initial humiliation into lasting recognition, proving that true power lies in knowledge, patience, and self-control. As the semester progressed, Amara Johnson continued to shine, not only in the classroom, but also in her research. Her work on complex equations and innovative mathematical models attracted the attention of professors and even experts outside the university. Academic publications began to notice her name, and some of her classmates turned to her for advice, fascinated by her natural mastery and her ability to make the impossible understandable. Harrington, for his part, had changed profoundly. The arrogance that had defined him at the beginning of the semester had given way to a sincere respect for Amara's talent and for the intelligence of his students in general. He now made sure not to underestimate anyone, and he taught with greater humility, aware that teaching is not just about imposing one's knowledge, but about encouraging and revealing the hidden genius of students. One day, after a particularly difficult class, Harrington approached Amara, his eyes serious but kind. "Miss Johnson, I must thank you. You showed me something I never really understood before. Talent is not measured by arrogance, and sometimes the greatest geniuses hide behind calm. Thank you for teaching me that lesson." Amara, with her quiet smile, simply replied, "I wasn't trying to lecture you, Dr. Harrington. I just wanted to do what I loved and show the truth behind the numbers." In the following years, Amara pursued a distinguished career in applied mathematics and scientific research, becoming a role model for young students, especially those like her who had to fight prejudice and superficial judgments. Her story inspired generations to never underestimate their own talent and to believe in the power of perseverance, hard work, and intelligence. Harrington, on the other hand, remained a professor, but with deep respect for his students. He sometimes recounted, with a humble smile, how a student had completely changed his view of teaching and humility. In this way, Amara Johnson transformed not only her own life, but the entire university, proving that true intelligence and genius are not measured by arrogance, but by passion, patience, and the ability to remain true to oneself. The arrogant professor who had humiliated her had learned the most important lesson of his career, and Amara continued to shine, silent but brilliant, in the fascinating world of mathematics.